Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we're talking about Norway. We're looking for moles. Now, one possible mole network, the Security Incident Management Analysis System. That's a network and a database of the U.S. government, I think of the State Department. Individual surveillance detection units were being recruited by the U.S. to spy on Norwegians. The story is to go out and spy on anti-U.S. demonstrations, anti-American activities, what have you. That's a likely story. If you've got a network that includes the former head of the Oslo anti-terror police, you have a perfect vehicle to subvert and suborn the Norwegian police. You can identify rotten apples, you can bribe them, you can blackmail them, you can get them working for you. And I think that's the secret of SIMAS and these individual surveillance detection units. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. We'll get to that in a minute. Think of this as the new Gladio. Back in 1964, General Lyman Lemnitzer created the Gladio network in Italy. Arms deposits and terrorists from a fascist background usually associated with them that then decided they wouldn't wait for a Soviet invasion to be a stay-behind, but they would start engaging in terrorism right away. That's the story of Gladio. How about SIMAS in that point of view? The moles. There are no helicopters available for the Delta Force or SWAT teams of the Norwegian police in the Oslo area. They couldn't get to the island, the Labour Party summer camp for youth on this island. They couldn't get there by helicopter because there were no helicopters. Sounds like all those exercises and drills that took all the jet interceptors in the northeast corridor and sent them to Iraq or Alaska or whatever it was on 9/11. So they had to go by the road. Takes a long time to get there by road. When they finally get to the landing, they choose a boat which they overload. It begins to sink halfway across, and they got to go back, a little bit like the Marx Brothers in A Night at the Opera. But on the other hand, once these cops get to the island, they call them by name. They say, "Hey, Breivik. Hey, Breivik. Hey, Anders. Drop your gun. It's us." And he does. So what does this mean? They know who he is. My wonderful sources in Norway, people that have been reading and gleaning out of the Norwegian press, and I want to thank them very much, they have reported that this guy was on a watch list as soon as he bought several tons of fertilizer from a Polish dealership. He got himself on a watch list of the Norwegian police, so they knew exactly who he was. But, of course, they couldn't intervene because that would have violated some kind of a rule. It's amazing when they want to, they'll indict a ham sandwich when they want to, but then if they don't want to, they find some technicality why they can't. Now, contrast the strange behavior of the police with the contrasting behavior of Markus Gleffe, Gleffe. Markus Gleffe is a German tourist who is present at the island, and he manages to make several trips back and forth from the island to the mainland and save about 20 people. During the 90 minutes, 1.5 hours, it took for the cops to get to the island. Doesn't it look as if the cops are determined to give the shooter, or shooters, as we'll see in a minute, ample faculty to kill as many as they could to get the kind of result that they wanted? We're reminded of the Paris police who let Princess Diana bleed to death in the wreckage of the car for about an hour before they took her to the hospital. All of this stuff absolutely typical. Now, that was the moles. Concerning the technicians, well, the technician is usually somebody who is really a trained shooter. Major Hassan at Fort Hood killed about 10 people, but there was a question, how could he do that when these were armed, professional soldiers? How could you kill so many? There were reports at Fort Hood of a second and indeed a third shooter. In this case, we've got an ironclad report of a second shooter. The wonderful Norwegian newspaper VG has reported that there was a second shooter. We've got 2 eyewitnesses who are named and other eyewitnesses not named who say they are convinced that there was a second shooter. The police say, oh, it's an open investigation, but to talk about a second shooter spreads fear. What spreads fear? This is a serious investigation. The obvious attempt is to write him out of the narrative. This has been on CNN, CBS Radio News, NBC Nightly News, France 24, you name it. Everybody in the world should know by now that there was a second shooter. They're attempting to write him out of the narrative. Don't do it. If you're in Oslo, go to the press conference and say, hey, yeah, but what about the second shooter? The second shooter is generally the key to the entire thing. Now, what they did is arrest a guy with a knife and say, oh, that might have been him. No, they let him go. Then they have a guy in Poland that's being held. He can't really be the second shooter. So they attempt to arrest somebody and let him go and make you think that that was the second shooter. We have a description. Dark hair, 1 meter 80 tall, looks Norwegian, Nordic features, whatever that means. But looks Norwegian, I guess, is what it means. So we have eyewitnesses and a description. It's not the same person. The killer we have is blonde. The other guy, dark hair. What's the story? There's a second shooter. This blows the entire thing. Now, the third element, the drill or the exercise. It turns out that in March of last year, March 17th to 18th, 2010, the Oslo terror police held a terror drill near the Opera House. Knowers of the geography of Oslo assure me that this is less than 1 kilometer away from the Prime Minister's office where the first thing goes off. And what did they do? They're using bombs. They're using grenades, concussion grenades, flash grenades, and other things. This creates the capability, and indeed it may create a cache of explosives in that area. In other words, inside the security screen around the government buildings, the ministries, and the Prime Minister's office, they may have established a deposit in the Gladio tradition of precisely these explosive elements that were then unleashed. Now, this entire thing is political from beginning to end. The attack is against the Prime Minister's office and the main bureaucracies of the Norwegian government. The attack on the island targets the sons and daughters of the elite, the people in the Labour Party, the government, the cabinet, and the rest of them. What's the reason? Well, Norway has a strange tradition of government. I mean, you've had people there like Gro Harlem Brundtland, who is one of the main Malthusian imperialist operatives, certainly of the 1990s. But for various reasons, and some of these are dubious, Norway has a tradition of being pro-Arab and pro-Palestinian. And from the Palestinian point of view, you're going to take whatever support you can get, quite obviously. 1993-94, it's Norway that sponsors the Oslo Peace Accords. This leads then to the scene with Rabin shaking hands with Arafat in the back lawn of the Clinton White House in 1994. It also leads to the assassination of Rabin in 1995 by Israelis who don't like what he has done. More recently, we're going into the UN General Assembly in September. The Norwegians have announced that they will vote to support a Palestinian state. They will recognize a Palestinian state. They want to have boycotts against Israeli interest. Indeed, the day before, there was a pro-boycott action going on at this island. The big thing, though, is the attack on Libya. I think this is decisive. The other one is structural. It's not new. The big thing is that actions by the Norwegian government threaten the survival of NATO, certainly the survival of the attack coalition, which is now assailing Libya. When it started, the foreign minister, Sturda, told Obama, Sarkozy, Cameron, the rest of them, don't do this, don't get involved. Norway was then put under pressure. Norway caves into pressure, right? They've caved. They've got some people in Afghanistan. In this case, they said, okay, we'll sign up for 90 days, 3 months' worth, with 6 planes. So 6 F-16s of the Norwegian Air Force, Royal Norwegian Air Force, go to take part in the attack on Libya. They represent 10% of the bombing effort. They're willing to bomb. Despite this, the U.S. attacks Norway and Denmark as being insufficiently committed. However, now, as of July, they've cut it down to 4 planes. As of August 1st, they've said, we are dropping out. It's the first NATO state to do it in this blunt form. Netherlands joined them on the same day. They said, we have 6 planes. We will do the no-fly zone, but we will not bomb. The danger then is that the entire attack coalition is going to collapse. So to intimidate the others, to intimidate the Norwegians, we get this false flag event. That's it in a nutshell. More details on tarpley.net, and minute to minute, hour to hour, Webster G. Tarpley on the Twitter feed. And we'll see you next week.